Good evening. Today is December 1st. My name is Samantha Villarreal. I am an interviewer for UTSA Oral History Research Project over COVID-19 and the impact it has had in our community in San Antonio. This project is directed by Dr. Winnie Chappell. Our guest today is Isabel Alvarado. Thank you for giving us your time. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
My name is Isabel Alvarado. I'm 20 years old. I am a junior music education major right now. And yeah,
And where did you grow up?
I grew up in Houston. I was born in Dallas and I lived in Dallas till I was about 8 years old. And then from the time I was 8 years old to now, I've been living in Houston, or I was living in Houston and then came here to San Antonio for school.
Nice. How long have you been in San Antonio?
I've been here for probably like 3 years now, going on 3 years. So it's been quite a while.
Yeah.
It feels like it.
And what was your family life like? Did it change when you moved to San Antonio or did it stay the same?
um, I do think it changed just a little bit. I feel like I kind of I've always been very close with my family, but I feel like in a way it like brought me closer to them in a sense because like I was like cherishing my time more with them because I was like, never like super around
Yeah.
them that much at that point and I don't know, it just makes you appreciate them more, makes you miss them more. So, yeah.
And what has shaped you into the person that you are? Was it like when you moved to San Antonio or like being away from your family?
Hmm. Um Honestly, it was probably like moving to San Antonio. I feel like you're always a certain way when you're like with your family, but and not that you're like not able to be yourself, but to like some extent you have to like you're limited on like how much you can grow. And I really feel like moving away from my family like really allowed me to like grow, as a person, to like figure
Yeah,
out who I am and like what I want to be, what I want to do, what I'm about, that kind of stuff. So,
I completely
yeah.
understand. And what do you want people to know about who you are now?
Um, hmm. I feel like I would want people to know that I I don't know. That's a very hard question because there's so many things, you want people to like know who you are, like what you're about, but like I don't know, just like I feel like I would want people to know that like I'm a very kind person. I don't know. I feel like I'll always be nice to anybody. I'm always gonna support everyone in what they're doing. I don't know. It's like I'm just I don't know. I feel like I don't know. Yeah. We'll stick with that.
That's good. So now I'm gonna ask some questions about like when the pandemic just started. So how did you feel in mid-March when life started to change because of COVID-19 in the United States? And how did life change for you?
So for me, I was personally on a study abroad in Italy when all of that was happening. So for me, mid-March was extremely like late end of February, early March was very, very like jarring for me because it was just so much change in like such a small amount of time. We were only there for a month before we were pulled out because of the pandemic. So it was just a lot of change. And then in mid-March too, it was like very hard to like cope with what was going on because those people who were like experiencing the same things as you were like, we're all spread across. Some are in San Antonio, some are in Texas, or some are in Houston, wherever people live, right? But then on top of that, it's also hard because you can't see those people even if you're
Yeah.
in the same city. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it was very hard. You feel alone, but strangely like close to people, like those people who share your experiences. So it was hard.
And how did you first find out when you were in Italy about like the pandemic spreading?
So when we were in Italy, we first figured out something was happening because we had like a meeting and they told us that we were no like that they were thinking about canceling our spring break because of the outbreak that was happening, right? The COVID cases in Italy were rising. And we were all kind of just like upset, we're not going to be able to go on spring break, or if we were just probably going to spend it in the city we were in, Urbino. And so we were just kind of like all very upset about it. And I don't know, they didn't really explain to the extent of what was happening to us, right? They were just saying like, there's a virus outbreak and we might have to send you home. But then they were also saying, no, but it's okay for you to stay here, but you just have to stay in the city. And then they're like, no, actually you're going home. Like they were like pretty flip floppy with what was going on. So it was very hard for us to like really understand like the amount of like how serious it was until like we were back home and then we saw on the news. So
and how was that whole experience like?
It was crazy, honestly. Like it was like an amazing experience. I would do it again. Like, I I obviously I wish that the pandemic weren't going to be, around to do it, but if I had to do it the exact same way, I would do it the exact same way. Like it was hectic, but I don't know, it's also like a story I'll forever be able to tell. Like I was in Italy during the coronavirus outbreak. I was there. So
and what seemed normal before COVID-19 that seems strange to you now?
Probably like going out in like large crowds with like no mask. I don't know. I feel like as a musician and whose primary instrument is their voice, right? Like when I get colds or like I get sick, I'm like out for at least, a week or a couple days, however long I'm sick for. So like for me, I think the mask has been like, I don't know, it's been really nice. I don't have to like super worry about getting sick. Like of course I'm worried, right? But like just knowing that if people have like, I don't know, the flu or like a cold or something, right? Like they're wearing a mask, so I feel like protected for myself too, for me wearing a mask and other people. So I don't know, it's like strange but comforting. I don't know.
And when the pandemic first like started to like spread and there was like the outbreak, what concerned you the most about the coronavirus?
Um Honestly, I was very concerned for like getting, obviously I feel like a lot of people probably say this, but like I was very concerned with getting sick even if I wasn't like necessarily like gonna die from it. It's just like getting sick and then being able to like pass that sickness on to others. Like my family, like I'm very family oriented, so I was like, if I came back in with corona and I gave it to my family and they got sick, and like I don't know, it's something that would be very hard to live with. Like, oh my gosh, I got my family sick, I could have killed my family. Like that whole like everything. So
Yeah, the same way.
yeah.
So, did COVID-19 affect your job? Were you currently working during this time?
I had a part-time job here in San Antonio that I would come and work when I was here because I used to go home and visit my family for their summers. I worked as we'll call it catering. I don't really know what the exact term for it was, but we were a party planning like business where we would go and we would set up parties, and like I would dress as like a Disney princess and I would just like be there and I would sing and I would paint little girls' nails, and it was fun, right? It was like a fun party, it was a fun time. But like, now, not that it's non-existent, but like we can't set up parties, right? Because you're not supposed to be having parties. So we can't set up parties, we can't do any of that. And so my boss has just been like, well, whenever it's safe again, I guess I'll call y'all back in. But right now she's just doing like cakes and stuff by herself. She can like make the cakes and like some decorations and stuff, so then she'll like drop them off remotely, just kind of or non-contact drop cakes off and stuff. So I can't work, so it's been kind of hard.
Yeah,
Some money.
I feel that. And how do you feel about those changes?
Um, of course it makes me a little sad because honestly, I do really like working. Um, like just from the aspect of like sometimes I feel like restless when I have free time a little bit. Like I like having downtime, but having too much downtime makes me feel like restless and like, oh my gosh, I'm missing something. Like, am I sure that there's nothing to do? Like I get kind of anxious when I have downtime because I have time to like think. So like too much. So it's been kind of hard, honestly, and I don't know. I feel guilty asking my parents for stuff too. Like it's hard being like, "Hey, can I have some money? Like I need money, right?" Like
Yeah.
you can't I feel guilty asking my parents to do that for me. So it's been hard just kind of like slowly watching a bank account drain because there's like no money coming in and it's kind of hard to get a job right now too. So it's rough.
Hmm. What do you think, or like, what do you hope it will happen in the future, with like your current job or just like with employment?
Um I'm hoping soon to find employment, of course. I'm looking around and I really hope that at some point I mean, at some point it will, right? When the vaccine comes out and everything. But like, I don't know. I really hope that I can work again because I really do enjoy my little side job. It's sweet, it's fun,
Yeah.
I love the little kids too. They're always so fun to be around. So I hope that I can do that again at some point.
Yeah, I feel like it has definitely changed all of our lives because I was
Yeah,
in work study and like I still do it, but it's not, I used to work every day and now it's like every other day, maybe twice a week. So it's just, it's been hard. So I
yes.
really understand. And how has COVID affected you and your family's daily activities? Has it changed like your daily schedule?
Definitely, yes. I was at home with my parents for a little bit. Like when we got sent home from Italy, I was quarantining with my family over there until I was able to come back here. Um, it's I feel like my how do I put this? I obviously it changes because my mom is back home from work, right? Like she's working at home and my dad he works from home anyway, so that was fine. And my brother was home all the time now, and I know my dad is used to being alone, so it's kind of like he's like reacclimating to us being there all the time.
Oh,
Always like talking to my mom, and my mom's like, "You can't talk to me, like we have to work." And like, I don't know, I feel like my family has like either picked up new hobbies to do or like we've just been cleaning. My mom has been like religiously cleaning our house now too. So I don't know, new activities. I'm not complaining against them either. So it's nice to.
has it affected your daily activities of like how your life used to be before the
Yeah,
pandemic?
I I used to go in person to school all the time, like just walking and I would get up, an hour before my classes started so I could like wake up, so I'm not like going to class super tired. But now like I wake up like 30 minutes before class starts just
Yeah.
to kind of wake up, and even then it's not that serious if I like want to hit a snooze button a couple times because I can just roll over and log on. And I don't know, I feel cooped up in the house too because I'm not really going out and doing things as much as I was. I used to like do homework and hang out with friends all the time, but now it's just like I can't hang out with anyone. I'm just like going on walks and you know, I
Yeah.
miss people a lot. I'm missing my friends.
And has it changed your relationship with your family?
Um, I would say yes. I miss my mom a lot because I really haven't seen her since I moved back down here. So I miss her a lot, and it's been fine with her, but like my parents are divorced, so my family that lives up in Dallas, it's been really hard because I really haven't seen them for like over a year now, and I know it's making my dad lives in Dallas, so it's making him a little bit like I don't know, not stir crazy, but like he's just like, I don't know, just upset that I haven't come to see him because he doesn't take it as seriously as I do.
Oh,
So it's been rough. Like I think that relationship has definitely changed a lot just because just like two different ways of living and we clash heads, so it is what it is.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Ugh.
And how has COVID-19 affected your community? What have you seen around your community since this had happened?
Um, I feel like it has COVID-19, it has kind of shown people's true colors, if I will say that, because I feel like because it has become such a, like, instead of it being like a public health concern, it's become this like political, like, I'm not going to wear a mask or anything like that, where in reality it's not about that. It's about just like keeping everybody safe and healthy. Like everyone wants to see their family. It's not about like you can't see your family. It's about like help keep your family alive. It's like that
Mhm.
kind of deal. So I feel like it has really shown people's true colors, and people who you wouldn't think would be like that, you're like, oh, it's like that. Like you realize that they're different than how you thought they were because
Yeah,
I'm
I
just how it
agree.
is, right?
How are the people around you responding to the COVID-19 pandemic?
I feel like people around me are either acting about as serious as I are, or they're like totally like don't even care about it at all. Like my like again with the juxtaposition of my family, like my mom, and like she takes everything like very seriously. We're very safe. She doesn't go out at all. Like they're just at home. They haven't been out really anywhere except for like walking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then my dad in Dallas, like he traveled to Mexico recently, like 2 times last month, just because he wanted to. And he like really doesn't like wearing a mask unless he has to. I mean, they've been like traveling and doing all this stuff, seeing friends, no mask. So it's like very like you either have them really lax, or I really see them like really being like
Yeah.
super super safe like me. So
Yeah, I don't really go anywhere besides like work and then school.
yeah,
That's it. Yeah. So I definitely understand that.
yeah.
Have you or anybody you know has gotten sick during the COVID-19 pandemic? What happened and what was it like?
um I think one of my stepdad's uncles died actually from COVID. I know he was like super super upset about it. So I mean I didn't really know him that well, but like just seeing, the my dad was kind of just like, I don't know, kind of shook by it because I feel like not that a lot of people like in our family didn't really want to talk about it, but like
Mhm.
a lot of people in our family didn't tell us that he was even sick until like he was dead, right? Like it was just like such like a, I don't know, it was just kind of weird how like the whole situation was handled. And like sometimes I feel like other people might handle it like that too, where like they're like COVID isn't real, and then they get COVID, and then obviously they're really sick and they die, and the like our family or other people's families are like a little bit embarrassed by it. Like I feel like my family was like kind of like, oh, can't believe this happened to us. And it was sad. My dad was really upset, and
Very
but
sorry
he's
for
fine.
your loss.
Thanks, it's okay.
Have you gotten a COVID-19 test?
No, I haven't. I've been trying to. I I was actually thinking about it for a little while because the campus was offering COVID tests, and I was like, maybe I
Yeah.
could just do it just to like make sure, just to make sure. But I decided I was like, I think I'm okay. I probably won't go. So I didn't.
Yeah. Are you worried about getting the virus?
Oh yes, that's like it's truly terrifying. I just like like the most terrifying thing to me right now is like getting the virus. And like I think it's so crazy. Like the most insane thing to me, obviously, besides like getting sick and being in a hospital, is like losing your sense of taste and smell. Like just living like that, like you can't smell, you can't taste anything, like even if you're fine. I think that
Yeah.
is so scary. Like I don't know, I really like eating food, like good food. And so like the thought that I wouldn't be able to like take, like I know it's like, I don't know, it seems so like stupid, right? But like I don't know, that's so scary for me. And like just knowing that I could get other people sick too, that is also like both of them are like equal level with each other of like
Yeah.
my fears of like the virus. So
I always see stories of people that they say that the first, I guess, how they first knew that they had the virus was because of they woke up and they couldn't taste their breakfast or like smell anything.
oh
So
my
that
god.
every morning I always like make sure I'm like, can I smell this just to make
Yes,
sure like I'm good?
it's
So
scary.
yes, I agree. It's terrifying. How do you think COVID-19 is affecting people's mental health since they have to stay inside most of the time?
I think it's really hard. I feel, I mean, I even know for me too, like it's been super hard. And like I actually decided to like seek counseling and stuff just because like it was really hard, you know. And like
Yeah.
it's like for me too, besides it being hard because of me being pulled out of Italy and then me not being able to see friends, because you know, I mean, as any young person, like any young person wants to see other people. We're not supposed to be like cooped up in our
Yeah.
houses, right? But like it was just, everything was just really hard. And like I feel like it's very hard to cope with everything. I mean, like nobody really has gone through this in like a while since like the Spanish flu, right? So like it's no, right, no one, and like it's never happened in our lifetime. So like we're all learning and we're all adjusting. And like I don't know, it's just really hard. And I know people also have hard time, like I'm not the only one, right? Like
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. It's been
yeah,
hard.
yeah.
What are you most looking forward to when the pandemic is over?
Oh my god, giving my friends hugs. I'm just like, oh my god, I miss them. I like just even seeing my friends, just like being like, oh my god, I miss them. And like my family too. It's been like so hard being away from like my grandparents and like my cousins and stuff. Like, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna like cry when I'm able to hug them. I just know I'm gonna cry. But
Yeah.
like that, and I don't know, even going out to eat in a restaurant, like oh my gosh, I can't wait. Or like going to concerts. I feel like literally everything. I want to do everything whenever the pandemic is over. Like whenever it's safe to go do things. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna go out and do everything.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
How has technology played a role in your life during the pandemic?
Well, I'm doing school online, so that's been interesting to say the least. And I just technology with keeping up with my friends too, you know, like not that I like didn't before, but I feel like now even more so, like I'm just calling friends just to like be like, hey, how are you doing? You know, like just because I miss seeing their face too. It's not even like a text like, hey, what's up? What are you doing? It's like I want to call you. I want to see you.
Yeah.
Please everything about your life. Like what is going on? Please, like, you know, just like
Mhm.
minuscule things, like, you know, like that. It's just, I don't know, it's really great that we live in this era when it's happening
Yeah.
like that. Like it's so easy to just call someone or text someone, or you know.
Yeah, that we can at least FaceTime or hear
Yeah,
their voice.
yeah,
And where
yeah.
have you been getting your news during the pandemic?
I honestly, whenever I was with my parents watched the news every single night. So I was watching the news with them every single night. What was it? The CBS news with,
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we were doing that. And then here, when I'm down here, I'm with my boyfriend's family right now. So we watch the Spanish news every night. You know, we're out here. And also just like, I don't know, social media stuff. Like, not that I like take social media like extremely seriously as I take the news, right? But like it is just like whether you see something that's interesting and you decide to go Google it on your own, just being like,
Yeah.
is that real? Is that for real? And then you go on your own and do it. But I've a multitude of outlets, I guess. So
That's
yeah.
good. What have your local leaders done in your community in response to the pandemic?
Honestly, I follow more Houston stuff because I lived there for a longer time. But I know, like in Houston, like Lena Hidalgo, she was doing like she was like really like, we need to close everything down. Like y'all can't be going out here doing things like this. And I'm sure San Antonio leaders have done the same thing too. And I don't know, Greg Abbott, I wish that he would have taken it a little more seriously from the start. And then I I had to do like a whole thing. I was in government over the summer too, like when all of this was happening.
Oh,
So like
okay.
I was like very like following like how government people were doing
Yeah.
stuff. And like I don't know, it's just very disappointing to see the way that he was like reacting to this and like once again like playing into like a political narrative of the pandemic, right? Like just being like businesses can't make you do anything. If you don't want to wear a mask, you don't have to. And then all of a sudden a couple months later it's like businesses have the right to enforce mask wearing, right? Like just like
So
he should have.
back and forth.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's stupid. And like opening bars up so early and like restaurants, I don't know. I feel like that was a bad move. I'm sure it looked like a bad new move on the news too. So
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on how the pandemic has been handled in the United States, in Mexico, or anywhere else?
well, I not obviously. I don't like the way the US has handled it at all. Right, just like making it such going on with the theme of the political thing, right? Like
Yeah.
it's just like such a political thing. It's not about that. Like everyone wants to make it so partisan. It's like it's really not. It's just about like keeping other people safe and like seeing how like the Europeans handled it, right? Like they they were like, all right, they masked up, they stayed in their houses for like a month or two, and then they were out doing stuff. And not that they really should have been out doing stuff like they are, right? Because they're like under a threat of a new um, lockdown, but like
Yeah.
just from the fact that like they were following guidelines, so like slowly things are going to be opening once their cases drop, right? Like it's just it's just so frustrating the way that the US handled it. Watching other countries being like, all right, the Americans aren't allowed because y'all like can't
Oh,
handle it, basically,
yeah.
right? Like it's so stupid. And like I saw something today saying that um like the CDC is warning against traveling to Mexico because right, like it's just cases are rising, like people want to travel. It's kind of stupid that like airlines and everything are pushing for traveling when it's like really not safe to travel.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how safe you are, is about other people who don't care, right? Like
Mhm.
yeah.
If you could go back in time and talk to yourself before the pandemic, what would you tell yourself?
Oh, that's hard. um Honestly, I would probably tell myself to maybe spend more time with my family before I left. Because I feel like before I left for Italy, I was kind of like stressed out in a sense, and I was also anxious about like, oh my God, I'm at that point I thought it was gonna be for 3 months, or like being so far away from my family for 3 months, like I don't know, just so anxious, kind of like worried. And I wish I would have spent a little bit more time with my family in Dallas before, you know, I ended up leaving. And I also would have told myself not to be that anxious about going to Italy because I was only going to be there for a month anyway. So by the time I was getting acclimated, I was just getting sent right
Yeah.
back home. So, but I don't know, probably that.
Do you think the pandemic has changed who you are or the way you see the world?
um, I don't necessarily think it's changed who I am, but I definitely think it has kind of it has skewed my view of the world. I feel like, I don't know, not that I thought that the United States was like the best country, because I did not think that, but like, I don't know, it really just makes you kind of sad to see how other people are reacting, right? Just like, I don't know, with the pandemic and then everything else that has happened within this year, right? Like, it's just kind of sad to see like how everyone's reacting to it, and like, I don't know, you just kind of like, not like lose faith in humanity a little bit, but you're just kind of like disappointed. You're like, damn, I don't know if I can say that, but like, dang, it could have been better, right? Like, y'all could just like be better, right? Like,
Yeah. Yes, I agree. How do you think the pandemic will have a lasting effect on the world when the whole COVID thing is over?
um, I feel like it's gonna be something we all remember, definitely, right? Like, it's not gonna be like, I don't know, like, I don't know if you like vaguely remember the swine flu, but like, like the swine flu happened, and then like, I don't know, we just all kind of forgot about the swine
Yeah.
flu. Like, we're never gonna forget about this, and like, obviously, it's gonna be in textbooks, right? Like, this, like a pandemic. It's crazy that like people, I don't know, in years time, right? Like, kind of like the purpose of this, right? It's like they're going to be reading about it, about how our lives were, about how we were doing online school, about how,
Yeah.
right? Like, just all of this, I think it's like crazy. Crazy.
Yes. Do you have any final comments that you would like to share in our interview?
Um, no, probably not.
Well, thank you so much for participating and giving us your time for this
Yeah,
project.
of course. Thank you for allowing me to participate.